Well, thanks very much, Will. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I had a couple of comments to make before I'd be delighted to take any questions that you might have. So first of all, we obviously understand that we're going to be hearing some kind of final decision from Doug Ford later today about the reopening of Ontario's publicly funded schools. I have to say, based on the media reports that we have been seeing and based on the information contained in those reports, it would seem that Doug Ford is determined to go against the advice of his own chief medical officer of health, against the advice of his science table. And so, I just want to reiterate what I had said a number of days ago. The position of the science table, the position of the Ontario Liberal Party is that there should not be a decision that is necessarily one size fits all right across Ontario, and that local public health units, those women and men who have the expertise locally in their respective regions, working closely with their school boards, should have been given the opportunity to make decisions for their respective locations or regions about whether publicly funded schools should reopen. I think it's also really disturbing to learn, again, in media reports this morning, that it seems evident to me as a dad whose daughters are in the system right now, that Doug Ford has taken so long to come up with this decision and to provide kids and their families and frontline education workers with some kind of certainty. He's taken so long because he's actually been doing partisan polling to determine, I guess, which way the political winds are blowing. That is deeply, deeply disturbing. It is discouraging, again, to me as a parent whose kids attend elementary school, an elementary school here in York Region. I think it does demonstrate very clearly that Doug Ford is determined to look out only for himself and his own political viability, rather than having the leadership skills and the sense of self to realize how to govern this province effectively. And I think it's really, really discouraging after more than a year of all of us dealing with this ordeal, that Doug Ford is still demonstrating consistently that he's not up to the job, that he doesn't have the competence, the wherewithal, or the capacity to lead this province. And that takes me into the second thing that I wanted to talk about today. Of course, today we are exactly 1 year away from the next provincial election campaign, which will take place on June the 2nd of next year. And after witnessing, all of us, the 15 million people who call this province home, Doug Ford's approach to governing Ontario through the last 3 years, it's never been more evident that Ontario is in desperate need of competent leadership. And all of the conversations that I have with families right across this province, the conversations I've been having now for more than a year since I first became leader of this party, it's clear that despite how hard they're working, despite them giving it their all, they're falling further and further behind and they feel abandoned. Ontario Liberals will continue to work really, really hard, relentlessly, to make sure that we put before the people of Ontario a positive forward-looking roadmap for our collective future, one that focuses on rebuilding and delivering a real recovery for Ontario's publicly funded education system, for the 2 million kids who attend schools right across Ontario, for their families, and for the frontline education workers who are trying so hard to do their very best, even though Doug Ford continues to undermine the work and the system. For those individuals who are looking for an economic recovery that delivers true dignity for workers and for their families, so that when we create prosperity once again, and I have no doubt that we will here in this province, that growth and prosperity is fairly and broadly shared by the people of Ontario. And we're going to keep working hard to make sure we deliver real solutions for elder care and for long-term care, for the fight against the climate crisis, and for so much more. Again, I just want to say, this is about earning the trust and working relentlessly hard to make sure people understand the direction that I want to take Ontario in. But fundamentally, it is about competent leadership. It's about security and stability. And it's about working as hard as one possibly can for the people of this province. Doug Ford doesn't have the capacity to do what needs to be done. I have the skills, the experience, and I have the team, and we will have the roadmap that will set Ontario up for success. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, just a reminder that the format's one question, one follow-up, and if you just message the chat or raise your hand using the Zoom function, I will call on you. And the first question is Colin DeMello from CTV Toronto.
Hi, Mr. Del Duca. I wanted to ask about that poll. I mean, isn't it prudent of the government to just take the temperature of, the public as well? I mean, they've spoken to the public health experts. They've gotten the advice of, everyone on the science side. Isn't it prudent for them to also get public opinion here to kind of understand how the public is feeling about this? And it seems like, a majority of people don't want to jeopardize the economic reopening if it means just keeping schools closed.
So let's consider a couple of things, Colin, with respect to the polling. If the government was looking for genuine information about how parents feel, then the polling or the analysis should have been conducted by the government, but it wasn't. It was conducted by the Conservative Party of Ontario. It's a partisan poll. So, I mean, if you don't go any further into this, that tells you the full story about where Doug Ford's values are, where his priorities are. Just like the television ads that he's been running now for weeks. They're not government ads. They're partisan conservative ads. This entire move, this entire play by Doug Ford and his team, his campaign team, over the last month or so has been all about next year's election campaign. It's not about a safe reopening. It's not about listening to the chief medical officer of health or the science table. It's not about listening to local public health units. It's not about what's good for my kids or your kids. It's been all about what's good for Doug Ford and his electoral chances. So that's number one. Number two, now we understand better why Doug Ford decided at the last second, last Thursday, to give education partners and stakeholders about 24 or 36 hours to give feedback on whether schools should reopen. Then he heard from the science table. That was all last Friday, Saturday. It's Wednesday. It's been several days longer since getting all that information. Then he's gone to his caucus. The reason that they've taken their time, that look, the decision to close schools or keep them closed, should that be what he's going to say today, that could have been delivered a number of days ago, weeks ago. In fact, parents would have then had the certainty at that point in time. He's been ragging the puck, literally, because he's wanted to get the polling done so he knows which way the wind is blowing as it relates to his reelection chances. That is despicable. I have kids in the system. You have kids in the system. Millions of Ontario families have kids in the system. Now, I said this last week, and then after I said it, the regional approach, listening to public health units, the science table said it, others have said it across the system. Doug Ford's choosing to ignore all of that advice and follow his own partisan polling. He doesn't want to listen to the science. He wants to listen to his campaign pollster. That tells you all you need to know about Doug Ford and his capacity to lead Ontario.
Follow up?
Thank you. And so if you were in the Premier's shoes right now, what would you do? Would you reopen schools across the province, or would you reopen schools on a regional basis?
Well, I was the first one to say it last week. I think it was last Wednesday. It should not be a one size fits all. The pandemic has not been one size fits all across Ontario. That I was perfectly fine with a regional approach based on what local public health leaders and regional school boards were able to come up with. So, that's what I'd said last week, and I stand by that. That's what the science table said as well. But there's something else really important to keep in mind in this. So we're going to hear from Doug Ford today, and then I suspect when it comes to schools and education, he and his team are going to go back to sleep, and they're going to start thinking about how quickly they can reopen the economy, even if they're putting other factors at risk or stuff like that. That's what they're going to do. But here's the thing on education, and this is critically important for all of us to remember. We're about 3.5 months away from the scheduled start of the next school year and schools reopening this coming September. Those 3.5 months, they're going to go by really quickly. So in order to give parents, kids, and education workers peace of mind for September, Doug Ford and his team need to go to work right now. So I'll call it a sham consultation that he put out last week for education partners when he gave them 36 hours to respond. He needs to reach out to all of those partners and stakeholders tomorrow. Well, I would do it today if I was Premier, and ask them to be with him, to talk to him on a regular basis between now and September. Then he needs to invest right away in making sure schools have better ventilation, making sure class sizes are a little bit smaller, providing real updates to parents and everyone else in the system about what the vaccination rates look like for kids over 12 and for frontline education workers. My real fear as a dad is that after he announces his big decision today, based on his own polling, not science, he's going to go back to sleep on publicly funded education. And as parents, we're going to be back in this mess come September. So I wanted the regional approach. I wanted local public health units to make this decision with local school boards. Obviously, Doug Ford's going to go in a different direction today, but he needs to do the work required starting right away so that this coming September, we have a successful reopening of our school system, not the complete chaos that we had last September.
Okay, I don't see any other questions on the line. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.